Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We'll call this informational meeting of Tuesday, July 2nd, 2019 to order. First on the agenda, we've got committee and commission reports, and today we're going to hear from the CVB bid board, and I believe Councilmember Brecky has a report for us. Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to, go through briefly just a recap of the bid board meeting. Terry Schmidt reviewed the April financial reports, noting a year-to-date increase of 5.6%, so things are going well. She also recapped the bid tax revenues report. February was up 2.9% over last year at this time, while March was down. January was up 10.4%. Terry went on to review the May 31st, 2019 financial report by line item. She noted the following. The CVB was featured on Kello yesterday for hosting, or this was last week, she was featured on Kello for hosting Brand USA, South Dakota Tourism, and the CVB purchase segment via Brand USA. That is a national magazine that's actually designed to generate business from Europe, which was kind of an exciting new thing that they're doing, and they're waiting, the magazine has just landed, so they're waiting to see if they can get some leads from that. And it has to do with European travel. Krista explained and distributed samples of examples of advertising opportunities. She gave a peak season update, noting that awareness is the key. The website RFP has gone out. Our current website is 4 years old. The RFP was sent to 16 businesses. Proposals will be reviewed the first week of August. So the CVB will be having a new website. Krista explained the Starbucks promotion and the efforts to gain new leads. Apparently this was very successful. They got a lot of new leads from that, a lot of response to it. The May attendance numbers at Falls Park Visitor Information Center were down, and year-to-date numbers haven't been that low since 2014. The belief was that was due to the rainy and floody season. Terry noted that we will be continuing the strategic plan this year and proposed that we keep the same officers for a second year to remain consistency. The CVB is deeply into the strategic planning process and developing a new strategic plan and perhaps even a new brand. And they're actually, I think, working with the mayor's office in that whole larger branding consideration. They're asking that we keep the same officers in place in order to have continuity during that period. And so Tom Morris, Sarah McMahon, and Scott Garrett agreed to stay on as officers for the second year. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor. And we will move to City Council open discussion. Does anybody have anything today? Councilor Staley.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got three things. First of all, I was able to attend the Convention and Visitor Bureau luncheon last Thursday, and I was sitting at a table with some smaller businesses, and we started having a dialogue before the meeting actually started, and I just got the sense from these people about how concerned they were about foot traffic coming into their businesses. Yes. And I've had the opportunity in the last 6 weeks to engage with some smaller businesses that have been having some problems with some regulations, some city mandates. And so I had this discussion before the luncheon started. And during the luncheon, they give you a chance to do a little shout out to your business. So I got up and I did a shout out to Jeff Eckhoff, our new planning director. And I gave him a shout out to this group of businesses, convention-oriented. I mean, they want to bring people into our town. And I said, the heartbeat of our community are these small businesses. And they need to be supported and encouraged and listened to. And I said to these people sitting there, I said, if you ever have a problem, I want you to feel assured that our Mayor Tenhagen has hit a home run in appointing this guy, because I've been in meetings with him and he has common sense, he has compassion, and we've been able to find resolutions and solutions for these small businesses. So that was one wonderful thing. Also, last Friday, we were all, I believe, invited to the South Dakota Newspaper Association luncheon. And I wrote Janet Brecky's name down there because I knew she was coming, and I think I might have called her to remind her. Your name's on my little thing there. But Senator Art Rush was given the Eagle Award. You want to leave it on the Eagle Award there, please, Jim. He got the award, and that goes to someone who has done an extra measure of effort to bring openness and transparency to government. And he's a senator, so he had proposed legislation saying that settlements, I believe third-party settlements, needed to be open to the public. And I had a conversation with him the year before about the event center settlement, which the Argus leader was working vehemently and spending a lot of money on trying to open that up. And Art was inspired by that very effort. So it was wonderful to be at this luncheon. And then I took a picture of they also had they had a panel discussion. And Jack Marsh, who many of us would recognize from the moderator at the last year's governor's debate at the Downtown Rotary Club, but Jack is also on the Board of Ethics. He was the moderator. And then we have Jonathan Ellis, premier reporter, equal to our Joe Sneevy sitting here in the audience now. Then we have John Arneson, who is the attorney for the Argus leader, who was, he has been successful in many efforts he's led for open government. And then Tony Van Heusen, I believe I'm saying that's right, he was the chief of staff for Governor Dugard. And then Dave Knudsen, who also led some legislation in the past for open government. So it was a great discussion. There were a lot of legislators there. I was the only city council member who attended, but they were discussing the very topic we've had some discussions about, and that is how we communicate like via email and texting and things with the public and within meetings, and how open meetings violations can occur through that. So that you can go to the next one. It was very, very nice. So thank you. And then, do we have another? And then 2 weeks ago, we did a neighborhood cleanup. And I don't know if I'm friends with the All Saints neighborhood. I know Kurt Sale is also involved with that. But they did they try to do it yearly, a walk along the Ellis and Eastern Railroad ditch area. We met at 14th Street, and some of us went west to Colville Avenue, and others went east over to 5th Avenue. We picked up over 1,000 pounds of garbage, spent the whole Saturday morning scrounging in these ditches. We found knives, there were syringes, there were other knives, and every time we found, right there you see the Ellis and Eastern stopped the railroad while we did the effort, and then what you see on the tracks was their big dump truck. So like, for instance, we found a couch in the ditch, so they had a big hoist that they came in and caught that up and shoved it in the back of their that railroad vehicle there. Found tires, there was a bike down there, but just lots of debris. And Diane DeCoyer, again, I'm going to give a shout out to this woman who has just taken on the responsibility of herding up these neighborhood associations. We'll talk about those in a little bit later in this informational meeting. But she did a fabulous job. And Diane, I think, has had some hip replacement. She's had some kind of physical things. And Diane was in that ditch. And I'm going to tell you, walking down those steps into that ditch was no small feat. And she was down there digging around, and we all had those clipper things so that, well, you see some of those people just grabbed it. But I learned how to use that clipper thing real good. You know, that stick with the thing on the end? So anyway, it was kind of fun. Is that all of them? Okay, so I just wanted to say that was great. And also, one more thing, Ellis and Eastern, owned by Sweetman Construction, it's been 2 years since they've mowed that area. They mow the area. The railroad takes care of the ditch they are not required to do anything. And so I'm pleading with them, and I know the neighborhoods, people who have that in their backyard would like them to get in there and mow that, because it's kind of a mess down there. So that's my 2 cents for the day.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Councilor Brecky.
Yes, I guess we're of interest, both of us today, in small business. I want to give a shout out to Manna Bakery. It's one of my favorite little haunts. If none of you know about it, it's located over by Whittier. It's in a very old building, and it's owned by a family, and they've been really struggling here in the last month because of construction. We just went through this last year on Minnesota and how difficult it is for small businesses when their road is shut down. They've actually closed the road they're on 6th and Weber, and they've closed it, or they're just west of 6th and or east of 6th and Weber, and Weber's been closed all the way to Cliff, and all of the access points were closed as well. So actually, I've been working with the Public Works Department this week when I realized that had been going on for 3 weeks, to see if there's any way that we can provide access. So I just wanted to let all of you know they enjoy excellent health scores. They're in an old building. It's a family-run operation. If you love churros, you can get a fresh churro. My favorite thing is to go to the farmer's market on Saturdays and stop there on the way home. They also have the equivalent of a coconut macaroon that'll knock your socks off. And they just recently, started a carry-out business with, authentic Mexican food. And so I've got some flyers that I set out there, and I would just hope, I really just discovered this because I've been going there the last 3 weeks, and I thought, geez, they're literally, they're squared off. They're the only retail business, and I'm assuming that it just kind of wasn't really noted because it's all residential there. So anything that we could do to help them out and give them a little extra push till they get through the final throes of this project would really be helpful. And again, I left their carry-out menus. They've got a nice little carry-out operation. I just started recently eating the carry-out food, and it's delicious. And I would also add, if you're an experimental cook, which I am, they got some terrific Mexican sauces, and they can tell you how to use them. So I would just suggest anybody to discover my little discovery and help them out, especially during this difficult time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, we'll move into presentations for today. Our Assistant Director of Public Health will be giving our annual ambulance service report. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you, Council. Alicia Kalura, Assistant Director of the Health Department. Several of us are here today in the presentation for the annual review of the Ambulance Performance Report. I'd like to just thank team members and leadership from the Health Department, as well as Fire, REMSA board members and leadership, and representatives from Patient Care Logistics for being here and taking time out of their day. You have received REMSA's annual ambulance contract performance report. The ambulance service contract requires that Patient Care Logistics comply in several areas, and I will just briefly go through these with you. Response time performance. Response time requirements for each priority have been met for each month. Clinical performance. Clinical measures, cardiac arrest outcomes, medical audits, and case reviews are part of the clinical performance standards that you have in the report. System improvements. Patient Care does engage in facilitating innovative programs to improve system performance. Workforce stability. Patient Care has taken several key steps to address employee retention, which is at 92%. Pricing compliance. Claims reviews and an independent audit have been conducted and as required of the contract. And reporting compliance. All reporting requirements have been met. So along with the additional detail that's provided to you within the report, Patient Care Logistics has met or exceeded all contract requirements for the contract year ending May 21st. This performance report was approved by the REMSA board last week at their June 26th meeting. In addition to the presentation of the annual report, tonight will be the first reading of the ordinance to authorize the ambulance rate increase. The agreement between the City of Sioux Falls and Patient Care stipulates that ambulance services will be provided without city subsidy and that the primary means of compensation will be through fee-for-service reimbursement of patient charges. In turn, an annual rate increase will be the greater of 3% or the increase of the Consumer Pricing Index for any given year. All rates and charges shall be approved by the REMSA Board and City Council. The Consumer Pricing Index for 2018 was 1.9%. Therefore, the Patient care rate increase for your consideration is 3%. Again, that will be business on tonight's first reading of the full council agenda through first reading. The REMSA board did approve this requested rate increase at their June 26th meeting. So at this time, I would like to invite Mike Bureau from Patient Care Logistics to come up and provide a detailed annual report for you.
Good afternoon, counselors. I'm here today to once again give you your yearly review of patient care logistics in Sioux Falls. I'd like to thank all of you for the opportunity to get up here today to kind of share our story and talk about our service to the city of Sioux Falls, along with some of our successes. So to begin, last year we requested to go ahead and transition our name and some branding. Which made me think as I was preparing this back in February 2015, that was the first time that I had addressed this body. And at that time, we had run through our mission statement, and I felt it was important to reiterate to you that that has remained unchanged. It is still to provide compassionate, quality care and service built around the needs of our patient and communities we serve through effective partnerships. And that has remained unchanged through our branding, along with our ownership change. I felt that was important. Additionally, I wanted to reiterate the fact that our values are also unchanged corporately from 2015. So we still believe in customer accountability, being attentive to human needs, being respectful, ethical leadership, and ethical treatment of patients, partnerships, leading by example, being understanding to our patients and our community's needs, and being safe. So something that we've been very fortunate with within the city of Sioux Falls since 2017 is we've been available to have an individual who works in the Sioux Falls regional area to be able to put them forward to the Stars of Life in Washington, D.C. with the American Ambulance Association. And we're very proud this year to be able to nominate Paul Cook, who is an extraordinary paramedic for us. He has been serving the city of Sioux Falls, along with volunteering in the rural communities surrounding Sioux Falls and EMS for almost 23 years. And we were very, very excited to have an opportunity to put him up and have him nominated and have him be accepted. He was unable to, unfortunately, attend the ceremony in D.C., but I thought it was important to bring him to light. He is a shining star of professionalism and experience and caring, compassionate caregivers in Sioux Falls. And we're very lucky to have him. Last year, we spent a little bit of time talking about our employee survey. To kind of reiterate that process for you, all organizations, or most organizations, I should say, do employee surveys to kind of gauge where engagement and satisfaction is. For ours, it's a double blind. So what I mean by that is it is a handwritten form, it's not computerized. We hand out the employees, they take it in private, then they elect an individual who they believe to be the honest person who holds that. They collect them all at the end of the survey time, seal it, and then we mail them off. I don't see, nor does my staff see that employee engagement information until after the Baldrige Group has run the analysis on it and delivered it back to us. So this year we saw some significant gains, especially in the engagement area, and we were very excited about that. So to kind of summarize that, what you see down there is we have a kind of an orange bar for you that represents satisfaction. So that's employees who either strongly agree or agree to the individual questions. And then we have an actual true engagement bar, which are people who only strongly agree, right, that comprise those two groups. So our first was personal and professional development. In this one, we saw satisfaction grow 9% over last year's findings, up to 83% from 74% back last year, and engagement was up 12%. And this was an area that we were very, very weak in 2017. That's one of the reasons why we began sending our supervisors off to the Safe Tech Solutions Training Center to help get our line supervisors better acquainted with how to speak to employees and how to help employees develop themselves and how to be encouraging to them. So this is the area that asks questions like, am I encouraged to develop my clinical skills? Am I supported to personally learn and grow in my job as I work through? Do I feel that what we do here is actually important, that I make a difference? Or more importantly to me, would I recommend this as a great place to work? So to see such a large growth and engagement was a very positive sign for us this year. We look forward to seeing what this year's holds for us when we start it in August. The next one was supportive, engaged culture. Here we saw a 5% increase in satisfaction over last year, along with an up to 88% from 83%. And engagement in this area was up 8% as well. This is people value my opinions, that I have a friend at work. My coworkers are committed to quality work. People have acknowledged me in the last 7 days of work for good work that I've done. So we're very happy to see both satisfaction and engagement grow in that area. And the final one was work environment satisfaction. And that one also saw a minor to moderate growth of about 5% in satisfaction and 8% again in engagement in this area. And that's kind of I know what's expected of me at work. I have the supplies that I need to do my job every single day. This is a safe place to work. So overall, we were very, very excited to see the growth this year all the way across the board, and especially in engagement. It's often very difficult to move the needle from somebody who's satisfied to being very satisfied. It's not as hard. You can make small movements, small changes in policy to move somebody from neutral to this is an okay place to work, but it's very difficult to take somebody from that it's pretty good to it's great. So we're very excited to see those changes this year. Something new coming to us, to this area. This year we got involved with Start Today South Dakota. So this is an apprenticeship program. This is in partnership with the School of EMS along with Compass for Military Service. This was originally brought to us by Compass as a way to help veterans returning with or without EMS experience in the military, as a way to transition into civilian life and an opportunity for apprenticeship into civilian EMS. There is a slight difference between military and civilian EMS. More importantly, I think, though that is an important mission, it appears as though, as some discussions at the state level that I've had along with Compass and the Department of Labor, it appears as though some of that grant money can also be used to move some other groups that are less fortunate to get involved. People who normally wouldn't consider EMS as a career choice because of obstacles that are in their way, or who don't have the financial ability to be able to make that transition to an EMT program or paramedic program. So we're very excited to be able to get involved with this. So it's really just a simple apprenticeship, right? They come in, and then through that grant money, they get paid while they go to EMT school. And then through that grant money, they also get paid while they're in paramedic school. So as compared to being somebody who takes a class and then does some training rides with us through the apprenticeship program, they'll of course get paid throughout that whole process. So we're very excited to be able to have an opportunity to get involved with that. We're not the only ones. We have some partners here in the state. A couple of the fire departments have worked with us on that as well. But we are very, very happy to add that this year. We think it's a very positive thing for this community. As you know, it is no surprise that all around the United States, but especially in rural America, volunteerism is declining and access to EMS in smaller communities is slipping away. I mean, the Argus only recently ran a story on this just a few years ago. EMS World just ran a big piece on it 2 years ago. So we're hoping that by giving people an opportunity to come here and to do some training, that perhaps they'll be able to return back to their home communities and provide EMS. You know, we don't expect every one of them to stay here and work for us. But if we can give them an opportunity to go home and to put an ambulance, you know, into Lemon or somewhere else, then that's a positive thing. So we're happy to be involved with that. We are still CAS accredited. We are actually in the process of moving through CAS. It is that time again. As of today, it looks like we got our finalization on our site visit between 3 options of dates, so that will be in September. So that is great. We've also moved along and moved through our paper application process. This is several hundreds of pages of application that flew through without too many difficulties. And we got it back with no deficiencies. So we're hoping to get the same thing as we move into our site visit. That will be a 2-day site visit. While they're here, they'll take a look at our budget in terms of the way that we budget to make sure that we appropriately budget. They will interview our employees privately to get their opinion on things. They'll go through our employee engagement scores. They'll talk to our hospital partners. They'll look at our medical protocols. They'll dive into all of our policies, from how do we handle narcotics to how do we handle sexual harassment investigations, to how do we handle discipline in general, to how do we handle engagement. They will deep dive for about 2 days. Usually a CAS reviewer who normally, in my experience, has years of EMS management and usually EMS authority experience as well, meaning that they oversaw an EMS system, and then usually an EMS recognized MD who specializes as medical director. So we're excited to have them in September. We expect it to fly through. We look forward to being still the only CAS accredited agency in the state of South Dakota. For the 4th year in a row, we were able to maintain Mission Lifeline. I'm very proud of this. Mission Lifeline really is looking at EMS systems that apply the most up-to-date evidence-based treatments to improve patient care and outcomes in the communities that they serve. So this has to do with looking at our time on scene spent with patients who are having heart attacks, right? How long do we spend on scene? Do we look at their heart and see whether or not they're having a heart attack? How quickly do we tell the hospital that's happening? How quickly do we deliver them to the hospital? Do we communicate that notification in a way that allows the cath lab to get spun up so that that individual can get upstairs and get the definitive care? So we pull all that data together, we submit it to Mission Lifeline through American Heart Association, and if we pass the mustard, then we get awarded. So our first year was 2016, we got bronze. That's the highest you can get your first year. 2017, we got silver. That was the highest you could get your second year. 2018 and 2019, we both got gold. This year, we actually qualified for Gold Plus. And that was an additional measure. You could get gold, but if you wanted to put out forward some other data, you could move into a plus category, and that was 12 leads performed within 12 minutes on patients who are older than 35 years old. So our medical protocol calls for that. Our paramedics use paramedic intuition and patient assessment to judge when that's appropriate, and as such, that was pretty easy for us to meet that benchmark. As we talked about last year, and as is in the report, Sioux Falls does participate in CARES. Once again, another year where we have excelled above CARES reporting organizations here in the city of Sioux Falls. This is one of my favorite measures because this is really a system measure. So for CARES, the timestamp really begins with someone calling Metro Communications, going through the EMD process appropriately, getting CPR instructions from Metro Communications dispatchers. It then generally moves to, in cardiac arrest, our fastest responders, which are Sioux Falls PD with their AEDs, and they do a wonderful job of getting there, getting CPR started, getting AED in place. Then comes the fire department and us with iGels and life pack monitors, advanced medications, right, and moving along. So for CARES to work, it kind of is a full system approach, with the ending where, in definitive care with either the patient receiving the care they need in a hospital facility or unfortunately passing on. But when we deal with cardiac arrest, that's unfortunately, one of the side effects of all of that. But overall, 20% survival. So this is people in cardiac arrest of cardiac etiology. So what this is really discounting are people who are involved in car accidents who go into cardiac arrest, for example, wouldn't fall into this data set, right? So you're 20% more, you're 10% more likely to survive in Sioux Falls than you are in most CARES facilities. And the interesting thing about CARES data is that the only people who really know what their survivability are people who are looking at it. And all across the country, there are communities that don't look at the data that's fed to CARES. So really, when you say that you're 10% better than CARES, what you're really saying is you're 10% better in this circumstance of people who actually look and try to improve and try to use evidence-based medicine to move that needle. Once again, witnessed cardiac arrest in a rhythm that can be helped with defibrillation, 56% survival versus 33 in the average of all other CARES locations. And it has continued to remain high since I have arrived. But, you know, it should be noted that Sioux Falls has been doing very, very well in its CARES data long before patient care came along. I just want to spend a few seconds. Overall, I wanted to touch here on what is a reporting year. So about 17,000 calls for this year. As you can see, there's a little bit of seasonality there. We continue to grow. So every year this gets a little bit bigger as the town grows. Of course, responses and emergencies need increases as well. So I just wanted to let you see what that kind of looks like and where we've been trending over the last 2 years. This year, I have been doing every year since 2015, but it's becoming pretty crowded on that graph. So I felt it was probably just more appropriate to start giving it to you in a 2-year increment so you could see some trending. Overall, I added this year approved exemptions because we've had some discussions about that. So what you can see in the blue bar there is the number of exemptions that are marked by month. And then the total, and then the line graph represents the percent of them in terms of total calls for service in that individual month. Roughly about 1% of all of our calls receive an exemption by contract. Our compliance marker for this reporting year, once again, fairly similar. All priorities in the emergency category above 96%. Non-emergency, which doesn't get as much attention, also above 96% in both categories. Non-emergency is just as important as emergency. And the reason is that our hospital systems rely on the ability to move patients adequately to get them to the facilities and the resources that they need. And that is handled in our priority 4s and 5s in town. So it's not as flashy as 911 calls, but it's still people getting to the definitive care that they need, and it's just as important. We had some discussion of some key time measurements. So this timestamp for this is really on scene or at patient. So this is after the 911 call is completed, and we've arrived on scene, and we get to the patient's side, and it's measuring that moment until when they're in the stretcher, or they're in the back of the ambulance, we have the hospital. So the average time of a patient prior to transport for a heart attack is about 14 minutes, 10 minutes for trauma, and 14 minutes for stroke. So the reason why these are important is when you look up at stroke and transport for a heart attack, these are both behind that very, very purpose of Mission Lifeline and CARES. It's about getting on scene, recognizing a problem, because time is heart tissue and time is brain tissue. So it's about recognizing that problem, getting them into an ambulance, and then getting them to definitive care, right? Trauma, it's really the same thing, because trauma is a surgical disease. So a patient who has severe trauma, there's nothing we can give them. There's no medication we can give them that's gonna really fix that problem. They need a trauma surgeon in a surgery bay. So the faster we can get them there within that golden hour, the better. We look to improve these numbers. They're good numbers. They're great numbers. But we still continue to work on improving that scene time. The important part that we know, because of our Mission Lifeline feedback, though, in CARES, is that we are getting the 12 lead identified. We are getting the patients to definitive care quickly, and speeding up the ability of being able to get them into that cath lab. I've got patient satisfaction here. So pretty much the same thing as we had last year, and similar to the graph you saw before. So engaged, patients strongly agree, and then satisfaction is strongly agree or agree. So once again, this is a outside service. I don't call people. Once again, I use Baldridge Group. They contact 50 patients at random selected by them per month, and then they ask them a series of 5 questions. The reason I selected Baldridge is because a lot of times, anybody who's ever taken a survey, you know after about 6 questions, you're done, right? And no one, our patients, when they're trying to recover, don't need 50 questions. So that is one of the reasons why I selected to use Baldridge Groups. They ask, the first question is not included in here. It is really a check for me. And that is 911 professionals providing instructions. So this is when an individual calls 911, they ask whether or not Metro Communications itself was polite and whether or not they gave the appropriate instructions. I have a contractual relationship with them. So it's important for me to know that at that first contact, they're doing what they should do. And as always, Metro Communications continues to do an outstanding, above excellent job. The ones that are concerned with this actual graph here is number 2, how did you feel about your response time to the emergency? So how did you feel about how long it took us to get to you? Did the paramedic listen to you? Did they explain to you what they were going to do before they did it? Right? Did they communicate with you? Did they, were they caring and were they concerned about your actual medical concern and your medical complaint for the day? Did they manage your discomfort and did they manage your pain? And were they courteous and were they professional? Right? And at the end of the day, those are really the 5 things that I need to know on how we're treating people. So we were very, very happy with this year. Of course, there's always room to improve. But overall, we ran at about 99% on satisfaction. And trending engaged over the year averaged out was about 75%, which was a mass improvement over last year. I've started putting these scores up monthly when we get them from Baldridge Group. I now post them out in the employee area so that they can directly see what the impact they have. And then I also post, when patients give positive comments, I post those as well. So that employees can see that really what they do makes a difference. And when we talk to people, you know, that people do realize, you know, that they were there to help and are thankful. And it seemed to have helped. And we continue to look at new ways to help engage this and, of course, improve it. We're not hospital systems. It doesn't make a big impact on revenue, but I think it makes a big impact on the way you treat people. So I think it's something we need to continue to move forward with. Last but not least is rebranding. We're about 60% through the fleet. I didn't think it was going to take this long, honestly, when I talked to you last winter when we transitioned through. South Dakota roads can do a heck to the bottom of a paint job underneath the chrome. So once we got in there, it turned out to be a little more expensive and a little more time consuming than I thought to get them brushed out. Now we are going to remount within the next year, but we felt it was important to put the money in and to do it right and to have the trucks represent the city of Sioux Falls and our organization appropriately. So at this time, we're about 60% through with 4 trucks left to go. And uniforms are about 99% complete on the changeover to patch. You can see there's a picture we took this year, just recently down at Falls Park. We have a new website coming out, and they wanted to know if anybody had a picture for the national website, and I said, we have a spot. So they're moving that to the national website. So we had a local photographer that we've done some work with come out here and take that shot for us. I should notice that uniform changeover has all been done locally. Though we are doing the sewing in-house, we have an employee who loves to sew. That's kind of her passion, and she asked to do it, so she's moved temporarily to that position. But the wrapping and the paint, with the exception of the 2 trucks that we brought in when we changed out our vans, have all been done here, painted at a local vendor, and the wrapping has all been done in local Sioux Falls vendors. So that is all I have today, and I'll be available for questions, as I'm sure there will be some. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Counselors, any questions? Yes, Counselor Neitzer.
I don't have a question. I just want to say good job with the employee engagement and driving up the metrics. It's a good news story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Staley.
Mike, I've got a few questions. First of all, I wanted to ask a little more about this grant for these veterans. So this means that any veteran could go through the program free? Or go into a little more detail about that.
Certainly. So there is an interview process, and then through Department of Labor, along with through South Dakota Department of Labor, there are some checks there they have to proceed through. It also involves an interview. Now, the interview does not mean that we have to agree to hire the employee upon completion, or that it's even the same interview for hiring. There's an interview to get involved in the process. I actually have a series of small executive summary that was put together in a PowerPoint from Compass that I would be happy to email to Jim David to get off to you guys. I'm not going to be real great on this. I'm the tertiary point person on it. It's being handled through Compass and one of my employees along with the School of EMS. I was just here today seeing it, but I'd be happy to get that to you so that you can get a little more in depth with it.
Well, actually, yeah, I'd be happy to put this on Facebook because I think that this would be very appealing to a segment of our society. And I mean, this isn't people, this could be a veteran who's been back from combat for 10 years. Is there an age limit?
No, I mean, there's no age limit, right? Not that I'm aware of.
From what I heard you say, it sounds like they would get this training free, and then they could go back to their hometown and
they could, yes.
Just a volunteer ambulance person as well.
And get paid as they're going through via apprenticeship.
So if we could get something in a way that we could, like bullet points or something, with the contact information where people could contact to get more information, I just think that's a great start.
Sure.
Since it'd be a shame to have a program like that and not have that out there for people to be aware of.
I agree 100%.
Okay, then I want, a suggestion in the future, if you could have a little number on your slides, that kind of helps us to reference it. But let's go to the slide. I just had a question on two other slides. The patient care logistics solutions calls for service, whatever slide that was, it's got some graphs on it. I don't know how we reference that.
Okay.
Can we?
Sure. Let me go back. Is that the one you're referring to?
That's it, yes. So, yeah, this is kind of interesting here. Why in 19, I'm wondering about those months of October, November, December. Because I thought I heard you say, of course there are variables that affect these changes. I didn't really hear what those variables were.
Oh, certainly. I apologize for that. So as you can see, we're starting, over the last 4 years, we're starting to see some seasonality. Of course, as you pointed out, October, November, and December seem to be running a little askew to that seasonality. What caused October to be such a high volume month is very hard for me to say. And the reason behind that being is there was really no trend for it. 911 calls were just up, and sometimes they are. I mean, it wasn't early flu. It wasn't necessarily weather impacts. It's hard to see why or explain why we had that moment, but
well, and especially since the year before that, actually the calls went down during that time. So, and if we had a big snowstorm, and I'm wondering, snowstorms, do you have more calls like with people with heart attacks?
I mean, we do expect to see some more, right? Because people are out shoveling snow. That's exerting work, especially when it's a wet snow, right? There have been studies that show shoveling, especially wet snow, can lead to heart attacks.
Well, and I would think in the summertime, when you have more people out drinking and outside, that calls tend to go up. But according to this graph, that unless there was some kind of a big party going on in October, what is Jazz Fest? Anyway, well, anyway, so we don't know that. And then the next question I had was, the next slide. Again, I see you got this huge peak going up in February and
Sure.
March. What the heck was going on there?
Sure, give me just a second here. So I assumed some of these questions would come, so I tried to pull some of these details out a little further. So looking over at February. So February was our highest month. We had 24 weather exemptions in that monthly period. So as you recall, February was a bad month. We had stairs, we had storage, we had sewer drains clogging and people out trying to clear roads. During that period, we had 24 weather exemptions by contract. So that peak overall was almost all weather exemptions by contract.
Okay, so back to, what I would have a request for in the future, I think it'd be interesting to have a breakdown, I don't think I saw this, but maybe and maybe you have it already, but how many calls there are, what exactly are you being called for? And,
By call type, right?
right, so that if we went back to the month before in October, you say, well, we had, 500 heart attacks called in, and 60 domestic, somebody stabbed somebody with a knife or something. I don't know how detailed you can get on what they are, but I think that would be interesting to know.
Certainly, I mean.
Severity, and some of these are not severe calls, right? These are just
Yeah,
any
some
calls.
of them, well, I mean, every call is an emergency to the person who made the call. But they are not all by any means life-threatening, correct?
Life-threatening, yes.
I mean, we could definitely, when it comes to call type, that's a metro area, that's something we could probably work a little bit with our partners at Metro Communications to kind of break down what that initial
That would be wonderful,
911
thank you.
call
And then I'll
was.
wait for that veterans information.
Okay, I'd be happy to send that along and try to get some more information to you right away.
Anybody else? Looks like that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, next we have our Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Finance. They'll present the State Theater Completion Plan. Welcome.
Okay, cool. Good afternoon, TJ Nelson, Mayor's Office. Also joined today with our Finance Director, Sean Pritchett, as well as Stacy and John from the State Theater Board, and Joe, saw Joe sneak in, and Allison Weiland, their Executive Director, and Jay with Journey Group, who is the construction firm handling the State Theater. Back in December, my 3-year-old got this book from my parents, by Chris Brown. He's a local person who does the Hagar, the Horrible cartoons, and reading through the book, it's about a monster named Sue, who wakes up in the underground lab in the Black Hills, eats her way across the state, and eventually makes her way to Sioux Falls. And reading the book, she eventually comes to Phillips Avenue, and the marquee, "Thank you for saving our historic landmark." And reading this to my son in December was a little ironic because we were in the middle of working with the State Theater and Denny Sanford on how we could save the historic landmark in downtown Sioux Falls. And as you heard in the big news last week, opportunity came along thanks to the generosity of Denny Sanford with a gift of $3.5 million. And hopefully with your support of $1.5 million from the city, we can get this across the finish line. It's been nearly 30 years that the building has been closed. And in the last decade, thanks to the hard work of Stacy and others on the board, a lot has been done to get towards the finish line. And now we have a chance to get this project across the finish line. So, I'll turn it over to Allison to talk a little bit about the history and some of the stuff that's been done in the last couple of years.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Allison Weiland, the executive director at the State Theater, and thanks for hearing us today. It opened in 1926 with a bang. The owners called it as glorious as fairyland and as sturdy as the pyramids. It was designed state-of-the-art for silent film and vaudeville. It was the queen of downtown theaters. There were many downtown theaters at that time, but this was definitely the crown jewel. It featured an 8-person orchestra when it opened and newsreels that were very popular, especially during World War II. People could come and see picture news for the first time. The marquee was replaced in 1947, and it featured the first public chiller system. Now, this is what the system that was in place even up into the 90s. It never had like the HVAC unit like we know today. It is on the state and national registers of historic places. And moving along to the timeline to reopen. Do I have that here? Excellent. So it thrived for decades, and you can hear countless stories about the memories that were made there. It did close in 1991 due to a thing called urban renewal and people really going to the malls and the megaplexes theaters. And people throughout the years have tried their best to open the state for various things. In 2002, the Film Society purchased the building and they were able to secure a new roof, which saved the entire building. But it's a pretty big project. In 2005, the Sioux Falls State Theater Company was formed. In 2007, the facade through the city's facade easement program was completed. And in 2011, the Community Appeals Campaign generated $2.2 million for the building. Since then, we've had many successful fundraisers throughout the years. John Swadine, our board president, stepped on in 2016, and I was hired in 2017 to help support and coordinate fundraising efforts. So what's been accomplished? It's a big building. It's 24,000 square feet. A new roof was installed. There was additions of bathrooms on the main floor. There were no bathrooms or an official concession on that main floor when it opened. Only 2 small bathrooms on the second floor. The facade has been restored, the asbestos removed, the lobby and the concession stands updated, new electrical and plumbing, new HVAC. The marquee has been repaired and the digital board added. The building has been saved and purchased. The original stencil work was revealed. You can't look at a photo from 1926 and get your color scheme. It takes a lot of work. So we're able to have that. The business plan has been created. The construction budget's been finalized. There's a plan and strong vision for the future.
So last Wednesday, thanks to Councilor Kiley and Brecky who were able to join us for the announcement. Big news from Denny Sanford coming in with $3.5 million. Denny's gift was contingent on the city stepping up and being involved with this. And if you know anything about Denny, he likes his giving to spur other giving. And from what I've heard in the last few days, there's been other large donors who have stepped up and wanted to help go towards the remaining items that are needed beyond what is budgeted for Denny's money and the city's money. That being the balcony, the basement, the second and third floor auxiliaries that are on the Phillips Avenue portion of the building, and then refurbishing the organ. Very rare for a lot of these theaters to have the original organs. I believe it was found in somewhere in Minnesota in someone's basement or garage, and got it back to the city. So a cool story there. A lot of the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. This was the big news story last week. Dave and Buster's might have knocked it out this week, but last week it was all about the State Theater. Some of the Facebook comments, I'm so excited about this, a true gem. I'm excited about this. Just took a tour of it. They've been doing tours over the last several years. Excited to see it come back to its former glory. A crown jewel for downtown. Congrats to all involved. Wow, Denny does it again. Thank you, Mr. Sanford. And then Mr. Sanford's words, this crown jewel will once again shine throughout the entire community. So the funding, 3.5 from Denny, that reopens the main floor to cinema. That's the walls, the ceiling, the screen, projection, sound equipment, the seats, the Denny seats, if you've had a chance to be in there, the big, nice leather luxury seats that'll be in there. Final touches for the lobby, concessions area, and a small office space, likely on the second floor. The city's portion will go towards exterior work. That's facade, tuck pointing, new windows, ceiling, all that, roof, and then health and safety code, sprinkler systems, and then accessibility, if there's any ramps or egresses or anything else that's necessary. So the city has a gifting agreement that's still in draft. We're still finalizing that. But some of the key points is both the donor's money and our money will go into separate banking accounts, and they will be paid out through a construction committee that will involve city staff members. So we have a checks and balance on what's being spent. The two different accounts also keeps it clean so that there's never a way for the city's portion to go towards something that's on the interior of the building. We're really focused on that structure and the life safety. For 10 years, the State Theater Company will maintain ownership. They will manage it unless otherwise approved by the city to change. They'll monitor the structural integrity of that building, and they'll provide audited financial statements to us each year. The State Theater will also provide a public benefit. As you may recall, the city in past years, the council approved funding for the projector for the theater with a public benefit tied to that. That agreement expired because they didn't need, I think it had a couple year window on it. That has gone away, but we're still asking them for that public benefit, but we're giving them some flexibility, whether it's field trips during the school year, matinees during the summer, museum, however they feel is best to adapt for that public benefit. And then should the theater go bankrupt or not perform up to the conditions, we do have an option to purchase the facility at that point. So what is our return? What does the city get out of this? This is a icon of downtown. We've got an independent study that was done that's in your packet showing the economic benefit for downtown and our return on that investment. Especially downtown, Stacy owns a restaurant downtown and another facility downtown. Winter months can be hard. If you've got a movie house showing movies every single day of the week, you've got people coming downtown for a movie. Hopefully they grab dinner, maybe a drink after that. Helps those businesses during the slow times as well as the busy times during the summer and fall. Historic structure. If you walk into the mayor's office, we have 2 paintings of the State Theater. I mean, it's just an icon of downtown that really needs preserved. And without our investment, there is concern that it could become a public safety hazard or just could never open. Entertainment tax will be used for this. This facility will generate entertainment tax. It'll bring in those dollars to help keep up our other facilities. Also like to point out too that this would be a one-time gift for the State Theater. We would not be contributing to their operations on an ongoing basis like we would a facility we would own like the Orpheum or the Pavilion for downtown. I'm going to turn it over to Sean. He'll talk about the funding aspect of this and the supplemental appropriation that will be coming to the council soon.
Good afternoon, Council. Sean Pritchard with the Finance Office. As TJ alluded to, so as part of the city's contributions, the request will be, and we would be bringing forth an appropriation or supplemental appropriation request to the council for $1.5 million that would be gifted to the Sioux Falls State Theater Company. And as TJ had noted previously, that would be deposited into a separated and segregated account whose disbursements would be controlled by this advisory construction committee. As far as the entertainment tax fund and utilizing that as a source of the funding, so there was various thoughts that were put into this being the appropriate source for this. First of all, I want to note that it's a natural fit in terms of the form and function of this facility. It is comparable to the existing city facilities that are being funded through the entertainment tax fund, and we do on an ongoing basis provide support and operations for repairs and maintenance and for capital investments for things such as the Orpheum Theater, the Washington Pavilion, the Zoo, Convention Center, and Sioux Falls Arena. So it is not unlike many of the similar facilities that we have supported. However, this would be a single and one-time contribution as opposed to something that we would be doing on a regular or ongoing basis, and that is something that we want to make very clear as part of this request, as it is singular in nature. But even a broader construct of the entertainment tax, and people call this or refer this in many different names as the entertainment tax. They may refer to it as a hospitality tax or the 3B. I mean, it's statewide in scope, and it is related to that third penny that is charged on provided foods, lodging establishments. It is on liquor sales as well as on ticketed events. But as part of that, a major component of what is allowed by statute and by Sioux Falls City ordinance is through promotion of the community. And definition of what promotion of the community is held in large extent to how that is defined by the elected officials within that city community, within that community. And that has been referenced or referred to by several Attorney General opinions that have been provided over time in regard to this particular fund or this tax. So as far as in terms of promoting the community, as we look at it and as we propose why the State Theater is eligible for this. First of all, as TJ noted, it does promote the growth and prosperity of the downtown, and it will be hugely impactful for our downtown in the winter months when we don't have those summertime attractions that are bringing people down into our community. And as the impact study, which has been made available to you, would suggest, they had denoted or calculated that impact to be about $26 per person. So that goes above and beyond just the movie tickets that are purchased or the concessions that they might purchase, but that incorporates other things that they may be doing downtown, whether that's eating at a restaurant or shopping at the retail establishments here in the community. So it has both impact for the downtown, but also for the community as a whole. It does have the opportunity to attract visitors to our community. It will have the opportunity to show films that people would not have an ability to see in our regular movie venues because they may not be economically feasible. These may be documentaries, these may be historic films, these may be cultural films about the history of Sioux Falls. And so it does, and then lastly, it does help provide, based on the historic nature of this facility, a cultural and civic awareness. All of these are important components to the utilization of the entertainment tax and in terms of eligibility. As TJ noted, and as I previously referenced, it is a one-time investment. And though it is not required for things that would be eligible for funding through the entertainment tax, the fact that it does collect the entertainment tax as well as a ticketed venue does create a nexus or a connection of this facility to the source of funding that is being proposed to make the improvements. The last thing I would leave you with is that the fund itself, we do work and analyze this fund very carefully on a regular basis, scheduling it out 5 years, 10 years at times, and looking forward thinking because of the facilities that we are supporting, we want to make sure that the fund has adequate balance and ensuring that funds viability into the long term. So we are consistently in every year as part of the budget process, but always as an ongoing basis, assessing the repair and maintenance needs, the operations needs, as well as the capital investment needs of all the existing facilities that we currently fund through this entertainment tax fund, and ensuring that we have the capacity to maintain them in a way that will make them successful long term. And we, based on our estimates and projections going into the future, we have the sufficient funds available within this to make this $1.5 million donation. Just so you're aware, and you see this in the monthly reports, we began the year in this fund with about a $12.9 million balance. About $3.6 million we consider to be restricted. That is related to the net asset position of our SMG managed facilities, so that would be our event center complex. So those funds are kind of held in a separate account that's utilized for that facility. So we have about $9.2 million that we consider to be spendable. Of that amount, we have already allocated or designated funds for repairs and maintenance, operations, and for existing capital investments that are already programmed in. for those facilities for this year. So the remaining balance of that fund available for expenditure is $4.3 million. So those are the funds that we plan to draw from or make a request from, and that would be part of that supplemental ordinance that we bring forward here in the coming weeks. With that, I am sure that if you have questions or comments, I'd be happy to entertain any, as well as Allison or TJ or anyone else here. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Staley.
I've got several questions, so I'm going to start with Sean. And first I'll start with a statement that I think concerning the news last week, there was good news for downtown lovers, and there was also good news for average citizens. Good news for downtown was the state issue. Good news for the average citizens was that 80% of our CIP budget was going to be designated to streets. So it was kind of a win-win week. So the first thing I want to ask about is, and that you just mentioned the $9.2 million that you have in reserve funds.
Those are the available balance at the beginning of the year, available for expenditure for the entertainment tax fund.
I get it.
Yes, yep.
But is there ever a chance where you could we ever take that $9.2 million? I didn't realize there was that much of a pooling of money. Could we ever take some of that and use it to pay the debt on the event center?
There is certainly capacity. We've been paying the sales, we've been utilizing the sales and use tax fund since that bond was approved and funded and began repayment. So that has been the source of that. Could we use a portion of it? There's always a possibility. I mean, it's an eligible use of the entertainment tax fund to pay the bond. However, it generates about $8 million a year, and the debt repayment is about $8 million a year. So
Well,
it couldn't.
And not to contradict you, but I asked Tracy Turbeck specifically every year what our debt payment was on that event center, and he said it was between 9 and 10 million.
It's about 8 to 9. It varies depending on the
Okay,
year.
well, I and that, just so people understand, that comes out of the second penny.
Correct. Yep.
So that's coming out of that same pool of money that we're so excited about on one segment of our society, that streets is going to be, we're going to be doing our streets with the capital money, right? So if we could free some of that up from the debt payment for the event center with this other money, it gets a little complicated, but that would be good news. So my second question, and then I'll pass it on to someone else, but it was mentioned in this agreement, a one-time investment, unless there's a bankruptcy involved.
Now, I wouldn't use the word bankruptcy.
But I'm using someone else's word.
Sure, and I'll define, the way it's actually written in the gift agreement, it says if there was a, if the State Theater doesn't meet the terms and conditions of the gift agreement in the 10 years of the lifespan of that gift agreement, then the city would have the option to purchase the facility for $1. It does not have to exercise that option, but it does provide us some security to exercise an option to preserve our investment. The other option is that we are returned the full $1.5 million that the city invested into the facility.
That's part of the agreement, that we'd get that back?
If they were defaulted or didn't meet the terms and conditions of the gift agreement during that 10-year period.
Okay, so I've got more questions, but I will defer to someone else.
Councilor Sale.
Yes, thank you. Sean, you've referred to the gifting agreement several times. Will we get a chance to review that before we're asked to vote?
I would certainly, if I were in your position, I would want to review it before I was asked to vote on it. So yes, Councilor, you will have an opportunity to review it. And it is still in draft format, so it hasn't been finalized yet, but it is in process.
So these documents will be finalized before we're asked to vote?
Correct, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And my second question, TJ talked about, and you could probably answer it, that in May we will get an annual report on the performance of the State Theater. I believe it was May that you might have used. Is that an annual report? Is that January 1st, December 31st?
It would be an audit report, and it would be by I believe you're probably a calendar year, fiscal year. Is that correct? Okay. But we usually give them 5 months for all of our establishments. Usually 5 months to get their audit completed.
Well, I guess my concern there would be if they do run into some financial situations and we get the report 5 months after the end of the year, that's long time for us to put a Band-Aid on something that might not have been taken care of. If they are in violation of the gifting agreement, sometime during the calendar year, let's say it happens in June, they report next May, that puts us at a terrible advantage. I would say in a situation like this, we should request the financials at least on a quarterly basis.
And actually, that is incorporated into the gifting agreement as well. So internal financials would be required and be submitted to the city on a quarterly basis. That's in there.
Outstanding,
So,
thank you.
You bet.
Councilor Neitzer.
I do have a handful of things, so I'll just do a couple and then defer to the entertainment tax question. And I think it's a good one because I've always wanted and hoped we'd get to the day where we could use some of the entertainment tax to pay towards the event center bond, thus freeing up money for other things. But something I've wondered about is, as I look at that fund balance, and you talked about it a little bit, I think sometimes when I and others look at it, we see a giant number, and you talk, maybe you're already doing it, but I think it would behoove us if we had maybe in the monthly financials something where it was really, really easy to see. For example, if I treated it as sort of an enterprise fund, if I just took all of the different facilities it supports and I took the operating subsidy, whatever you wish to call it, that we're giving to them, and then maybe I divide that by 4, so that's like 3 months worth, for example, and I call that like, whatever the word is, encumbered or whatever, that's going to be our reserve. We're going to have an entertainment tax reserve that's locked up. We can't touch it because we have to make sure that we can pay the operating and pay the bill. And then going through maybe the next 10 years, kind of like you do with the sewer, for example, and listing out and having like the trajectory of all of the capital that we have to do. Because we have giant capital. I mean, you look at the event center, we have some big stuff coming up because it's a huge building. We have $1 million, boards and things like that coming up. Take all of that and then show us what the number is left that we have to, that's truly we could spend.
Sure. I think that's a really good comment. And one piece that as we model these out, and we've been working on this over the past several months and weeks and months, really. But really, we want to see at least a couple of $1 million maintained in that account, just from a working capital and reserve standpoint. So we have an unexpected expenditure that we're not aware of, that might not have been planned, that could be of a significant amount. We want to be prepared to handle that, both on our event center or restricted side, because there are funds that are being held in SMG's account on our behalf, but some of that eventually can start to be drawn on for maybe some R&M or some capital improvements that happen at the event center. But we got to maintain a certain amount of liquidity in that account because of the volume of cash that is necessary for deposits and ticketing and things like that occur there, the working capital needs. But the same thing just overall for that. So I think we already kind of do that modeling on an annualized basis. I think it would be a neat thing that we could look at is saying, okay, if we segregated 4 months of operating expenditures that we make to those facilities, because those are truly things that they rely on, particularly like Washington Pavilion, for example, or the zoo, they rely on those expenditures to meet their operational costs. Having that delineated out, and then what we have for remaining balance is definitely something I think we could put together and show for even several years out, because we do look at, say, the event center. We've worked with SMG and they provided forecasts as, okay, this is when we think the ribbon board has to be replaced based on our experience at other facilities. And so we've plugged in those items, even if we have some plugged items that are 10 years out from now, because we know we need to be prepared. And maybe 10 years it's not ready for replacement, but we're aware of it and we've planned for it.
Which again, you're doing a lot of these things internally. I don't know that we need all the information, but if there's some that we could see, because I think it would behoove you, because if we see a number and we don't understand what's behind it, it might look sort of like a huge fund balance, like, well, what are we doing here? Why are we hoarding all this cash? But maybe there's some context that we need to know that, oh, by the way, you have a $4 million capital expenditure coming up. So if there's just some way to just kind of delineate how much is free, that is really, really that we could get at.
And I think we could maybe even in either this month, or if not in time for this month, but the next month, have some sort of exhibit that we could include in our financial report, just a separate page that kind of shows and walk through that as something that we can continue to work on.
Okay, and then my other question is, I did tour the State Theater, and it was really fantastic. I don't know, maybe a year ago, something like that. There was quite a bit of sprinklers done, but I've heard some different answers to this. Is the sprinklers, is that all done, or do we have more to do, and who's paying for that?
I know we've talked to, because some of the city funds would be utilized for some of those interior health and safety improvements, but that's the extent to what we were really looking at from an interior side. I don't know if Allison, just the lobby area is sprinklered? Okay, so just the lobby apparently is sprinklered, but not the full facility.
Okay.
So
And
that'll be part of this
our
project.
funding is going to, the life safety would be for
Life
that.
safety issues, yep.
Okay, thanks.
Counselor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I guess I want to make sure that my comments are not directed towards the State Theater, but change in the policy that you're asking us to make. I understand the Attorney General's opinion from back in the 80s, and Attorney General Meyer Henry at the time talked about promotion and it being a wide-ranging area of what we look at for promotion. But we sold this third penny to the public 25 years ago that it was going to be very limited in the uses. I think there are some facilities and entities that feel really strongly that I wouldn't say that they would say it was their money, but we're making a large policy decision and change here of how we would use this money. So to keep it as simple as possible, there are several nonprofits that are going through capital campaigns and doing things. Would you suggest by making this policy change that, say, the Butterfly House could come to us and we could use part of the third penny money to add to their expansion because it promotes the community, a number of people come to that. If this body chose to, could we make a contribution to their expansion project?
I'll refer back to the fact that it is a policy decision. So promotion can be fairly broad, and there are circumstances within the Attorney General's opinion where they've been pretty broad because they want the communities to have the flexibility to meet the needs for their own communities. I think where this fits nicely in with our entertainment venues in particular is it is comparable to the existing venues that we already fund. So I think many people could argue that the State Theater, the Orpheum Theater, the Washington Pavilion, all arts organizations, all downtown creating an arts district, they're very comparable in terms of what they're attempting to accomplish from a downtown, but also an arts district perspective.
So you would think, excuse me, you would think that maybe the Butterfly House would be outside of the realm of what this could be used for?
I think that the city council could make a determination from a policy perspective of whether they believe the Butterfly House to be eligible. But I can give you some examples of what other communities have used it for, which would include a heritage museum in Spearfish, run by a separate and 501c3 nonprofit. But it has been utilized by the city of Keystone to build a parking lot to accommodate tourists in their community. So it is broadly defined and basically given a lot of flexibility to the city's elected officials to make that determination.
Well, I think, and again, I go back to my concern of, I understand what the state law says and what the Attorney General said back then, or the former Attorney General in his opinion, which is an opinion that without any case law behind it. What I'm struggling with is we sold this to, or prior people sold this to our community as that we were going to use this third penny tax for the pavilion, the convention center, and the Orpheum, along with the Canary Stadium or the baseball stadium, and those type of things. And it was very limited in its scope, and that there was even talk at the time, once the pavilion was paid for in the convention center, that we would actually look at repealing this tax and moving forward. And so this feels to me like we're opening the door for a lot of uses. Prior councils have chose, when they decided to include the zoo, they made a separate exemption just for the zoo to be used for this money in ordinance, because they felt that the policy and the commitment that we made to the community were those entities, and they felt that needed an ordinance change. So maybe that's talking out loud about it. Do we need an ordinance change to just include the state, or are we kind of opening that door to anything that would be in an arts and entertainment district?
Based on my conversations with the city attorney's office, it doesn't require a specific ordinance. The council at the time specifically wanted to note the zoo in there for any variety of reasons, but could have fit under the definition of promotion based on a series of the attorney general's opinions. And it was actually 3 separate attorney generals have made opinions in regard to this particular entertainment tax idea and its eligibility guidelines over a period from 1984 to 1992. So it doesn't hold the weight of validity by law because it is not law, but in the absence of further clarification from based on legislative intent, one turns to the Attorney General's opinions to provide that insight to municipalities. And in this case, in those occasions, it has found a series of these different types of promotional activities to be eligible that are not uncomparable to what is being proposed here. That being said, you know, does it grow the broadness, I guess, of what is eligible under this? That's something that I can't decide for you. What I can say is we have broadened that scope over time. It was initially the Convention Center and the Washington Pavilion, and then we added a little bits and pieces. We've added the Premier Center, we've added the Sioux Falls Arena, we've added the Sioux Falls Baseball Stadium as well. So it has grown over time, and those have been conscious, and the zoo, which you referred to. So those have been conscious decisions that have been made. The addition of those facilities have not all been done by ordinance. The zoo was chosen to be done that way, but the others were not specifically identified that way.
Okay. I guess, and again, is that, you know, we're in that process of maybe taking the zoo, at least from an administrative function, that taking any of the third penny money out from the zoo. That's been our position over the last 2, if not 3 budget cycles, is that we want to use less and less of the third penny for the zoo, and then we're accumulating more. And so it just, I'm trying to wrap my head around if this just opens up the door for anything that we decide is promotion and entertainment and arts, and how we do that. I have no doubt that we'll find the $1.5 million to meet our commitment to the State Theater at this point. I'm just concerned on how and where we get that $1.5 million from. So that's what I have.
Okay. Anybody else who hasn't gone yet? Councilor Kiley.
Thank you. And you know, we do have a unique opportunity here. It's not often that we, for a 1.5 million investment on our part, that we also have another 3.5 million that's going to be invested by another private donor. So, I mean, it is unusual in that sense compared to some of the other things that we've been discussing here this afternoon. So, I personally think that the return on investment is pretty good here. What it's not only from the State Theater Company's perspective, but also from our surrounding businesses in the downtown area there, that it's just going to be the gift that keeps on giving. So I'm pretty confident in that area that the return on investment is good. And I should say thank you to Denny Sanford for his willingness to step up and contribute once again to our Sioux Falls community. Has there, in the gifting agreement, has there been consideration given to creating or opening another position on the State Theater Company board for a city official? So that I would agree that we don't want to get into the ownership and operation of another facility. But we do want to have, with an investment, we do want to have some guidance in terms of the direction of the facility and the company. Can you answer that, or is there somebody else that's?
I would say that there has been some discussion around that, and what would be incorporated in the gifting agreement, so that's to come. It would be as part of that. So,
is there an anticipation of when that will be finalized? And I know Councilor Sale already asked, but when that may be available?
Hopefully very soon. I know we're meeting about it again tomorrow to hopefully finalize the details on the gifting agreement so that it can be given to you with enough time to be able to review it before. So in terms of the timing as well, the first reading, the ordinance would occur, it would go to second reading. It would be at the second reading that the gifting agreement would be not provided, but that's when that would be considered along with the second reading of the appropriation, when it would technically become effective. So it's a one-time resolution consideration. part of that resolution consideration will define some of the bases for utilization of the entertainment tax as well for that gift agreement. So I failed to mention that previously.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Staley.
One of my questions, on the upstairs of the state, are there apartments up there?
No, there are not. It's unfinished, and they were not proposed to be finished as part of the city investment or from the Sanford investment. So those are some of the secondary items that the State Theater Board continues to be working to fundraise for. But it's open spaces, so it could become additional gathering areas for events and so forth. I believe the office might be moved upstairs, if I'm correct, Allison. So that's the only piece that actually would be finished with the Sanford donation. Otherwise, they will remain unfinished. They're not necessary for occupancy, but they are just open spaces.
Were there ever apartments up there? She said yes.
I don't know. Has there been?
Oh, but that's not, because I was thinking that could be an added source of revenue if that was rehabbed. Oh, so that could be, okay. Secondly, tell us about, now was it 2.5 million that's not accounted for here?
Do you want to talk a little bit about the 2.5 million? Not
No,
Denny's portion, but what it was
the shortfall.
The other portions? Yes.
Good afternoon, councilors. John Swedin here. The $2.5 million will finish the second and third floor levels. The third floor, we haven't determined exactly how it's going to be utilized. We have some issues we have to deal with there, but 2.5 will open the lobby. We'll finish the second floor, put a concession stand on the second floor, and we can do some other things from a small theater aspect, maybe on the second floor, and that's what it'll take to finish the building.
Well, and so I'm backing this up. So we've got the Sanford contribution, we got the cities, but my understanding was that then there's this extra money is that going to be a fundraising source?
We are actively fundraising as we speak.
And that is the 2.5 million?
$2.5 million.
So you said that's going to open the lobby? Is that what you just said?
No, the second and third floor and the balcony.
Okay, so let's just say worst case scenario that 2.5 doesn't happen. Then that doesn't hold this whole thing back at all?
Our operating business pro forma is built on a main level auditorium reopening only.
Okay, so
Those 200 seats in the main.
yeah, because that's been some conversation in the public is, is this like a puzzle that needs that extra piece to be complete?
Yeah.
And you're saying that it doesn't?
They're independent.
Okay, and then I like that the city's saying, we're going to have our account, Sanford's having their account. I'm wondering, with the Sanford account, it sounds like the city's going to be we're going to scrutinize and put the bids out. I'm assuming the Sanford account, they're going to do the same thing? I mean, it's going to be tight, that people are going to be...
We have an obligation to Mr. Sanford to be great stewards of his money. He's got a very specific vision for how he wants that money spent. And you'll also see the construction budget, which includes the line by line. You may see a more elevated version of that budget of how the money's going to be spent.
Okay, and then how do they, when it's all said and done, because we're hearing now that one-time gift, not going to help you with operational costs, so you're planning to make a profit, I would assume, right? I hate to use that word assume. I don't want to use that word assume. I'm thinking you're going to make a profit. What's going to be the big revenue source? Is it the movie part? Is it?
The concessions are a big part of it, a big part of the revenue stream. Are they going to be privy to the business pro forma, which we've developed? Yeah, we can get you we have a 5-year business pro forma that shows a $785,000 business year one making $85,000. It delineates the revenue sources broken down by cinema, by concessions, by all of that. So we could be happy to share that with you.
And I think when I moved here in the 80s, am I right that used to be a budget movie place? I mean, it was. So are you ever thinking about offering like a big draw would be, we got the Levitt thing going on free, where you'd offer a night or two where it would be reduced cost
Absolutely.
for.
There are so many different programming opportunities for us. On the weekends, the gift agreement does articulate that we have a children and education-based focus with our programming. We're talking free matinees for the kids on Saturdays, just like the good old days, things like that.
Oh, that would be, well, see, the more you can do on that, the better sell this is for the public. And I have to say, I had written down before Counselor Starr brought this up, but when we're talking about giving you the gift because it's going to promote the community, that really does open the door for other entities to say, well, we're promoting the community, why can't we have a bite of this third penny gifting source? You understand? So again, coming back to saying to the people, yeah, you're going to get this back for this gift that you've given us. And the thing I do think is attractive too is that what I heard said last week is that we are in no way going to be responsible for the ongoing sustenance of this. So that if something collapses, you're not going to come back and just put the burden of sustaining it back on the city, which I think is important too. Because we've just learned, unfortunately, with another project downtown, that things don't always play out as we think they will. Protect the citizens.
Councilor Neitzer.
I'm not sure if I have any, well, there is one question, and I think I know the answer. Will you be asking for some sort of a beer license?
Yes, we're talking beer and wine license at this point. Yeah, we'll acquire one.
Okay, very good. And I think that's all I have for you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. In terms, there's some very valid concerns and stuff I've thought about in the last week. One of them is the promotion. Looking back at SDCL, it looks like it was pretty restrictive, and then it was amended to be pretty liberalized. So I think it really comes down to just a plain reading of it, and the intent of the legislature was to give us wide latitude, but that's where it comes in. So I think it's definitely illegal. It's just a question of whether or not we want to make that the policy. The concern about setting the precedent, I've struggled with that too, and that's where I think the resolution would maybe need to be, and I've shared this with the finance director, we need to probably make it very, very clear that in this particular case, it's not just because it's a venue, it's because it's a historic venue and there's a matching gift. Those are the two things that make this one unique versus other ones. And I think, because I had that same thing, I thought to myself, well, what if another theater came to me and just said, well, we bring people to the community? And I think that's a distinction that we need to talk about and memorialize that in a resolution, so that people later, if they take a look at it, they'll know where we were coming from. So making that as forceful as possible. The last couple things is my biggest concern, and I'm not saying I won't support it, but my biggest concern is human nature is the sunk cost fallacy. And I'll tell you what I mean. We put $1.5 million in. Let's say the thing goes south in 5 years. The temptation is going to be of everybody to say, we've put $1.5 million in, we can't let it go under. Next thing we know, we now own another venue. I don't want to do that. I can't bind future councils, and so how we could go about doing that. So to me, I will tell you, the idea of owning it for $1 doesn't really appeal to me, because I mean, we could market it and sell it, but my biggest fear is we have another venue, which, I mean, quality of life is important, but we're supporting enough venues already. So frankly, I'd rather have an escrow account with some money in the bank that we could just have if they don't meet their obligations. But the biggest thing is trying to make it really clear in that resolution, and I can't bind future councils, is to say this was a one-time gift and it was never intended that we were going to ever own a movie theater. But I can't bind future councils. So that's the thing that gives me the most squeamishness. So just a statement.
Councilor Brecky.
Not a question, but a statement. I've watched this project for over 30 years, since 1991, and dreamed of it, of us being able to restore a palace downtown. The same entity that's going to be restoring this is doing the artwork and the restoration, restored our second palace, or our first palace, the cathedral. And for those of you that watched that process and were fascinated by it and awed by it, that's what awaits us in this next and final push. And in that 30 years, as I was trying to think of, really one thing that stands out for me, in that 30-year period, after the first 10 years, by the 10th year, Sioux City had renovated their theater. And so for the last 20 years, they have been reaping the rewards of it. And if you talk to anyone from Sioux City, they will tell you it is the center, the hub. It is one of the hubs, if not the hub, for their downtown. I pondered why, it took us so long because, back in those days, we were kind of competitors with Sioux City, and we never let them outdo us on anything, but they got theirs done first. And so I know that it has that potential for us to be that huge draw, that huge hub. And for whatever reason, it took us this long. But I truly think in the end, that's probably even going to be better, because I think the residential is downtown now. All those resources that weren't there as we were going through this, it truly is the last jewel in the crown of downtown Sioux Falls. When we open this thing up, the people are there to support it, the residents are there to support it, the business is there to support it. And I just think the outlook is extremely bright, and possibly so because, it's happening right now instead of 20 years ago. So I'm really excited about it happening. I thank you to the mayor's office for diligently working on this. Really, I was involved in a meeting in the first month of coming into office, and they've been working all kinds of different options and trying to come up with what was best. And then with Denny Sanford's gift, the green light is on. And so I'm thankful to them and all the folks that have been working with them diligently to make this happen. And I think that the entertainment tax issue, while I understand my council members' concern, I think, just with anything, we are the policy setters, so we can set the policy as narrow or as broadly as we want. And that can either be done by language or just by how we make our decisions. So that's all I have to say, and I don't have any questions. I look forward to voting for it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilor Neitzer.
I had one more, and somebody from the State Theater, something else that I was thinking about, and you can help me with, is in the age where I can buy an Ultra HD TV, 80 inches, and I have all kinds of abilities to watch all kinds of streaming things at my fingertips. It's pretty attainable. They're actually not that expensive anymore. And then I have these other theaters. So what gives you the confidence, and I don't know the business, but what gives you the confidence that this is gonna make a go, and that people are going to go there when there's all of these other entertainment options, including just hanging out at home?
I love this question. The movie theater business has been steady since the 1940s. It took a hit when television came out, but you look at all the statistics and it's been very steady. There's nothing like this in the area, especially with the recliners and luxury seating. The closest is Mankato for that. Also, you have a kitchen and you still go out to eat. People like being in the community and supporting a nonprofit while they're doing it is a huge plus. And we're also going to be offering unique things that you may not be able to get at home. It's also about that shared experience of just walking into the theater. That's an experience in itself.
Okay, good answer. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I do. I want to follow up on that because you're excited about this. As you put the pro forma together going into the future, and I didn't want to dig into the operations, but now I'm tempted. So how will this compare to, the Pavilion struggled when they tried to do second run movies and make that work. We have another business that's their primary with the West Mall 7 is second run movies. How do you compete in that? The luxury seating, I get that part of it, but again, just a block away, the Pavilion so struggled, and I don't think they ever made money on the theater part of it in the Cinedome and that part of it. So you're taking this to be the main business model of what you're doing. So give me the.
It's been a movie house. That's what people know it as, and the community knows. And it's also in all of our, reaching out to community members. That's what they want. Movie theater is right on the top of the list.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else? I have one question, and this might have been answered somewhere in all the numbers that have been flying here. So when we've got the 3.5 and the 1.5, and then we're talking about, maybe the easiest way to ask it is this. So is there a current account for the State Theater that's, I know there's been some money raised for it for quite some time. So there's some money there right now too. Is that the 2.5 we're talking about, or was that some kind of an estimate for giving? And maybe that ties into my question too. What do you anticipate for annual giving and getting? As people say, usually when Denny gives, usually donations follow and that type of thing. So kind of my question is, aside from the 3.5, 1.5, what's sitting here and what do you anticipate coming?
Yeah, so it's 2.5, just to be clear, to finish the balcony, the mezzanine, and then there's a little office area, and then the third floor apartment area. And that's the restrooms and the secondary concession and things of that. And we have a plan to raise that money. We really feel that with construction going and the excitement building, that now is the time to finish it while we're in construction, so we don't have to shut down operations. And it's also the most economical way to do it is to finish it now.
Okay, well, that makes sense. So the 2.5 is a goal. Okay, so that's out there and you're anticipating it'll go on from there as years go on, I'm sure.
Yes.
I was kind of curious if that 2.5 was already sitting in an account or that kind, or where you're going with. I think I got it. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you all so much. All right, next on the agenda, we've got Mr. Bixler. It's going to work us through some things here. I'll just give a little bit of background, kind of what we're going to do here. Dave is back today as a follow-up to our budget discussion on June 11th. We had a good discussion then, but there's still guidance that we need to provide him with the budget submission. So to this end, Dave will show the requested items, each of which we need to provide him guidance. The best way past councils have done this is by taking a public and transparent survey of each councilor's preference for each item. A majority vote in favor of an item will direct Dave to add it to the budget submission. Likewise, lack of a majority means it will not be added to the submission. Now, to be clear, we are not officially adopting our budget. We are simply providing guidance to Dave on what to submit for the 2020 budget. As you know, the final budget is not officially considered by the council until September when it can be amended. So first, what's going to happen is Dave's going to provide an overview of budget items. He will read each budget item, and then he will turn it over to me as the chair of the meeting, where I will basically ask if you have any questions, comments, that type of thing on the item. And then we will ask each council member by name at the end whether to add or don't add. And again, majority will decide which item is in or out of the proposed budget.
Mr. Chair, before we go too far, if I may, I guess I'm curious on how we've used this procedure in the past. I know in my 3 years, I don't think we've used this procedure. I mean, it's one of the things of the informational meeting is that we don't vote and don't poll. I mean, that's why we do executive sessions and stuff at the end of this meeting so that there is no opportunity to vote. So I guess I'm curious on how this method's been used in the past or by prior groups.
Take it away.
There has been in the past, excuse me, at a capital surplus working meeting in the chambers, there was a number of items that were suggested from the administration, and the council were to decide where they wanted those dollars to go. And the way it worked is that we had it up on a screen, we had a spreadsheet, and they would pick and choose what they thought was what they wanted to see on the budget or for the capital surplus, and then it was a thumbs up or down. And that's how they came about their decision. And that just happened to be the year that they put in the State Theater's projector.
Okay. Any other questions on the procedure?
I guess I'd like to expand on what Councilor Starr's question is. When did that take place, Mr. Bixler? Just one time? Is that what you're
Just
saying?
one time.
Because it hasn't taken place in my 5 years.
Oh, I believe it took place in 2013.
So are we restricting ourselves in terms of what we might want to bring forward in the future?
This is just giving me guidance to put into the council budget that's going to go into the overall city budget. And at the end of the month, the mayor's recommended budget will come out, and that then will include whatever I need to add for, or don't add, that the council requests.
Because the other thing that Councilor Starr had mentioned, we generally do not vote during informational sessions. Can you explain that? I mean, aren't we in essence voting?
Yeah, I could answer that. So you cannot conduct the business of the city inside an informational meeting. The ordinance reads that they're supposed to be informal. They still are governed to a large extent by Robert's rules. So going back, if a consensus needs to be found on a particular administrative item, then this is a suitable way to do it. It was done in 2013. It's been done various times in committee meetings. That's typically how committees have pushed items to the city council. That's not expressly addressed within the city ordinances. And the other component is this certainly doesn't bind you to anything. This just gives Mr. Bixler his guidance on what to send to finance. And just like in previous cases, even with the capital surplus item that he referenced, and then the full council again, gets a chance to revisit it, amend it, basically, do whatever you can within your powers at that official meeting.
Okay, so in other words, then, if there is any counselors among us, and I'm not saying that it would be me or anybody else, if there is something else that they're working on, but they're not ready to really bring it forward at this point in time, that does not preclude them from doing so.
No, at the second reading, they would have the ability to offer up an amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
Good questions. Anybody else? All right, so next.
All right, the 2020 council budget currently is at 1.6 million. If I take out the election expense of 184,000, the 2020 budget will be about 3% of an increase over the 2019 budget. The budget impact of the proposals to be discussed is 19,000, and if added, the 2020 budget would be 4.4% above the 2017 budget. And I'll go through the items. In 2019, the council plans to send 4 councilors and 1 staff to the National League of Cities City Summit. In 2018, the council sent 4 councilors and 1 staff to the National League of Cities City Summit. The proposal is to establish the city council travel baseline at 4 councilors and 1 staff attending the National League of Cities City Summit.
Okay, so do we have any comments on that issue in particular?
Mr. Chair, I apologize.
Councilor Brecky?
I will make a comment. That was a proposal that the first 3 proposals are proposals that I have submitted, and so I would, present them, I guess. Again, my history that I've experienced with attendance at National League of Cities, going back, over, a 30-year period, is it kind of depends on the interest of the council that's sitting at the time. Some councils are more interested in attending and receiving that kind of training and those training opportunities than others. And so, over the period of years, it kind of has shifted depending on, how many people are interested and how excited they are about becoming, interested in that kind of training. And it occurred to me last year as I was watching this council, because, when Dave put the history down here and it shows it goes 3-3, 4-4-4, and then 5-5, it does fluctuate from time to time. But there was talk amongst us, and it appeared to me that there was really a lot of interest on the council in, attending this kind of training. And so I, propose that we go ahead and continue the practice of the last 2 years, of adding, a 4th council member to attend the National League of Cities Summit Conference, because that has been the interest for the last years. These same people are on the council, and I guess I think it's something that I think is valuable, and I would encourage us to participate in. And so, I suggested that we go ahead and make that our practice. Again, it's reviewed annually, but I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't, consider doing that again in the following year, in the 2020 budget, because I think there is that interest on the council.
Okay, any other comments on A? Councilor Kyle? I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go with Councilor Starr. He was going earlier anyway.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chair, I guess more of a statement than anything is that I feel really strongly about the National League of Cities, Congress of Cities in DC, and that we are represented in our nation's capital. I think I know we've made the decision in the past, the discussion has been that it's a better conference to go to the main one. But I think there is that opportunity to not only lobby and be included what's going on at a national level. Obviously, the federal government impacts what we do as a city, both from a city and an administrative part, and that it's, I believe, vital that we participate in a national level as well. Having the opportunity to attend one of the city summits, the experience, the training, the opportunities, the ideas that are generated as part of that. We spend a lot of time from a policy standpoint telling our employees that we want them to be trained, we want to invest in their education. We need to invest as a council in our education. One idea, one opportunity more than covers the budget impact that we're not only talking about today, but in the future. And I feel really strongly that in the overall picture, that I'm not sure what the number is, but that at least several of us have the opportunity to attend both events. They're both major events that the National League of Cities does, and I think they're important to be there. So I'm not sure that's as in support of A or B or C by the time we're done, but I feel strongly that we're represented at both events.
Councilor Guy.
Thank you. For me, it's difficult to separate A, B, and C at this point in time, because if we're addressing A and we decide we're going to send 4 counselors and 1 staff to the National League City Summit, now we've designated that it's got to be that particular event. And as Councilor Starr just stated, if he maybe wanted to go to the National League of Cities event in DC, that could be excluded based on the decisions of this particular group. I'm not sure why we're not addressing all 3 together. Yeah, I think and the other thing that before I forget, you said if we authorized all of these, it would be approximately 4.4% above. What is our, and this might be a question for Director Pritchett, what's our city budget proposal coming in compared to 2018? Or maybe you can answer that as well, Mr. Bixler.
You're asking for what the budget is for 2018?
How does the city budget proposal, which hasn't even been presented yet for 19, compare to 18?
It's 2020.
In terms of total dollars?
20 to 19.
Yeah, 20 compared to 19, sorry.
I think, if I may, I think that A is really establishing for the council that there would be 5 people traveling. And where they go to, I don't think is the relevant point here. I think it's the fact that we're saying that there are going to be 5 people traveling, because that's what we've done in 2018, and that's what we're going to be doing in 2019.
Well, if we're going to do these item by item, I mean, I would be fine if we're not designating that it has to be the National League City Summit this year, or this past year it was in Los Angeles. And I don't have an issue with the 5. I have maybe, because I don't know that I necessarily want to see us sending 5 there and then an additional 3 elsewhere later on, I'd have no problem if it's 5, and then the council member could choose whether it's the November or the March conference.
Councilor Brecky.
If I could speak, since these 3 proposals were my proposals, I would be delighted if we could talk. I don't think there's any reason why we can't and shouldn't talk about them all together. And I would like to have presented them that way. It's, again, we're kind of new at this and we're kind of going through this. But yeah, what I'm trying to suggest, so is it okay if we do that? Does anybody have any objection to me kind of just presenting the package? You know, because what I was trying to accomplish, and that this second handout that you got, the one that shows the history, was what I had Dave make this for me as part of my submission for these proposals. What I'm looking at is, you know, we have 2 organizations. If we need to be trained, and you know, I'm thinking of council member school. We all come in with our individual backgrounds and no expertise on being a council member. And so council member schooling or council member training or council member continuing ed, whatever you call it, our major resources for those are SDML, South Dakota Municipal League, and National League of Cities. And we spend, you know, $68,200 out of our budget for all of the city employees that need to be members of South Dakota Municipal League to be members of South Dakota Municipal League, which was kind of a surprise to me. And Dave gave me the history on that. It used to be in the mayor's budget, because that's a lot of money, $68,000 to be a member of Municipal League. And that's not just for, you know, how we participate in it, you know, which is the annual meeting. We go up to Pier once. Christine attends board meetings. It's very limited, but we're also paying for what, you know, the rest of the city employees that are active in the Police Chiefs Association, the Municipal Attorneys Association. And apparently that used to be in the mayor's budget, which seems like a place where it should be. So if any of you didn't know this, it's news to you, it was news to me, and I think maybe it was kind of a, you know, something that Dave gave me the history on. It had, you know, why it had bounced back and forth. There wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to it. But anyway, looking at that, I thought, you know, when you look at what that offers it, what benefit we get to that as council members, it's a huge value, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, you know, that it should be eliminated at all. We should absolutely be supportive of it. But when you think of what it values to us, that organization, you know, its largest membership are the smaller cities. And, you know, having us as member is a tremendous, and active is a tremendous value to them. But what they can do for us, we're kind of in a league of our own. And again, I think we should be active, we should be involved, and I'm not saying it's not a value, it's a huge value to us too, but we bring a lot of value to the table to those smaller cities and what we do. But National League of Cities, to me, that's our place. That's where we are now a large city. That's where, you know, that really is where we can engage with large cities and larger cities to, you know, really bring the expertise that we need as our city continues to grow and flourish. And so, you know, the fact that we spend $10,000, you know, $10,610 to be a member of the National League of Cities, and then, you know, we had been sending 3 and now 4, you know, I think we'll get far more return from our investment if we add, you know, that 4th one to the National League, or just 7 total, and let people go where they want to go. I'm not married to that, but I would really like to see us have a presence at the Congress of Cities as well. I found it so extremely beneficial, and I would agree with Pat, and I suppose, I mean, I told him a lot about it. Just, we are a large city, you know, we get to speak as one, you know, at that Congress of Cities, you know, to our Congress. You know, it's very, I mean, we're a player now, and we need to be part of that organization and part of that group. And then the training stuff that's attached to that meeting was really valuable as well. It's just of the same high quality as it was at the city. So I'm looking really more for, you know, I don't really care how it divides up, but I would, you know, it would be sad to me if all 7 people just picked, you know, going to the summit and none picked going to Congress. But I would like to see us have a presence. I think that will happen naturally, because I think if people attend it, they'll enjoy it. So I'm not, I guess I would just say I'd like to see us add the 3, you know, the four additional opportunities. And again, the people in the rotation could then, you know, do it as they see fit. So you know, however this is presented, I'm certainly flexible for that part of the discussion and what you're most comfortable with. But mostly what I'd like to see is us really actively involved in the membership of that organization that we pay $10,000 to be a member of. in a way that really gets us the maximum value.
Counselor Neitzer.
So these are all related, but they do stand on their own. And in my discussions with you, I think the confusion lies in the proposal. It should say, really should say, you start with the premise that are we sending 4 counselors and 1 staff or 3 counselors and 1 staff? And really what we should say is to an NLC event, just without regard to where it is. And then in the next step, we could decide, are we going to allow the Washington stuff, and then people could choose, and if the other ones weren't voted for, well, then the question answers itself. The only one you can go to is national. So I don't think you maybe meant to put NLC City Summit right there. Is that?
No, I didn't mean it to be confining. I usually just budget it as travelers.
We're just talking about travelers. Are we? Yeah. How many trips are we budgeting for a year?
That is
4 or 5.
Yes, that's
pretty
how
much
I
it.
go
Even
about
forget where we're going. Just 4 or 5 trips.
And I guess there would just be those natural, we can only go 4 at a time anyway. So if we agreed to, 7 council members attending, then it'll divide itself up naturally based on the fact that more than 4 can't go because then we have public meeting issues.
And fair enough, but what I'm saying is we can vote on these standalone, and then we can, and then it will answer itself. I will say for me, for item A, I'm willing to do the 4 and 1, but only if there's a statement, there's a note in Munis, because there's a description field. It has to say 4 counselors and 1 staff. There has to be 1 staff member going. No more arguing about whether staff gets to go. You guys outlive us, guys and gals. We're only here for a short time. Your training is important. It has to be 1 staff member. As long as that condition's in there, I'll support it. If it's not, I can't.
Yes, Counselor Staley.
Well, and I don't know that anyone was trying to say staff wasn't going to go. I don't know. Was that part of what you were saying, Counselor Brecky?
No,
see
I
staff-
just wanted the maximum number of council members to be able to attend. And
We've
again,
just
it
had
kinda
that argument in the
solved
past. I just wanted to make it clear that we just put it to bed.
Yeah, and I don't even know about any argument in the past. I think we had a discussion a year ago about whether 3 council members or 4 were going to go. But I didn't realize that we were paying $68,000 to the municipal league. I do believe the city is benefiting from that as well. So I think part of what we need to do here is maybe have a conversation with the mayor's office and the finance department to say, let's look at maybe splitting that up. And then you free up a lot of money. And I agree with what Councilor Starr said, is that the development for ourselves going to these things is immense. Councilor Neitzer, myself, and Starr went, and Mr. Greco went out there to Pittsburgh, and I'm telling you, those things we went to were mind-blowing. I wish we all could have sat in on every single one of those, all of us together, participatory budgeting and talking about, all sorts of things. So as far as our development, that's invaluable. So I would agree with Councilor Brecky, and I also think that Councilor Kiley, I think you had a great idea that instead of designating which one of these it is, I'd say, I'm happy to go to bat to get the city to pay for their half of the municipal league dues, but that we allow for 7 council members to attend. It doesn't mean that they have to go. And I think in past years, as we see here, there were times when nobody went. I think Councilor Karski was probably the record for attending the most of these things. And that's fine for him to go, if it's available. So I would say allowing, make it 7 counselors traveling, and then 1 staff member. Unless Councilor Neitzer wants to say that anytime the council travels, the staff member has to go with them.
Well, to be clear, though, if we are going to budget the national or the municipal league dues in the mayor's budget, that we're not going to have $68,000 still in the council budget.
No, we might have half of that, $38,000, $34,000.
All right.
Right? If we got them to go half with us?
But then we would budget half of the, we would just budget for half of the dues and memberships.
Right, we'd save $38,000.
All right, that might be an item for another day. Right, let's keep it to this so we can wrap. Counselor Sal?
Just to dovetail a little bit on what Councilor Neitzer said, I would rather have the staff go than a council member. They transcend us. Their education is hugely important. And I think we all know that your employees' education is very vital. They can keep us out of a lot of trouble if they're educated. So I will tell you what, I won't be voting for any increase in numbers of counselors going. I don't care which ones they choose to go to. I've heard a lot of great reports from these things, but sending 4 council members and 1 staff per year, that's fine, but jumping it up to 7 council members, I just think that's too big a jump. So that's my position. If you're looking for where Kurt's at, there it is.
Thank you.
And I'd like to respond to that. As a teacher, that would be like saying that the custodians need, and the clerical staff need to continue to get educated, but the teachers do not. That would be like saying you as an insurance salesperson do not have to continue to work for your endorsements, but your secretary and the custodian need to go to school. And I don't mean custodian, I'm just looking for support staff. So the fact of the matter is, Mr. Sale, Counselor Sale, is that you need to go to these conventions. We all do. Because if we think we know it all, then you're going down the wrong road. And I'm just telling you, having attended one of these, your mind is opened. And you hear how other parts of the country are doing this, how they're attending to their constituents, how they're looking at projects. It's very exciting. So to have the statement you just made that we don't need to go and we don't need to grow, I totally disagree with.
I did not say that. And if you were to play the tape back, you would never hear that. What I said was having well-trained staff benefits us all, and that they transcend us. They will be here after our terms are up. They will help counselors for years to go. I did not take anything away from the education that the council would receive at these. My view is staff is hugely important. And I don't care if it's a custodian, they need to be trained in what they do. A good custodian makes you look good. A good server, a good teacher's aide makes a teacher look good. We all need better education to get there. So I'm saying the staff is hugely important to me. I would rather have an educated staff than me be educated because they can guide me in different ways. They can stop me from making a mistake if I'm going down that way. So I'm here to support the staff for travel. And I'll go back to my statement. I will support 4 counselor members traveling and 1 staff. Wherever they go, they can choose.
And if I may say one more thing. Also, within this is a very flexible situation we're talking about, and Dave Bixler, I'm sure will confirm this, that even if we decided today, whatever we decide right now, does not limit a person's ability in the next year to ask to go to a convention. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And Kermit Stagers was able to come up, and he wanted to go to a separate thing than the last National League of Cities, and he was able to do it. So this is not an end-all as to how this is kind of like a loose recommendation for the budget.
Okay, and I think we've had a pretty good discussion for our first one, so why don't we,
Mr.
Excuse me.
Chair?
Yeah, excuse me.
Sorry. You got more?
Well, yes, I do. I don't think there's any question about the value of professional development. I mean, it is extremely valuable. The issue I would have with increasing this to 7 counselors is, I mean, it is directed at us, gives the perception that we're sending us on nice exotic trips outside the city. I'm a little concerned about creating that perception, especially when the 4-to-1 with 4 council members and 1 staff member, that allows the 8 counselors to travel every other year, but it would actually allow our staff to travel only every 3rd year. And so I'm kind of sensitive to that as well. And I do agree that it has to be flexible, because if we have a downturn in the economy and our revenues are down, we need to be prepared to cut out the travel as we did 2 to 3 years ago. It's just, and we had that same discussion. It doesn't appear to be fair if the city across the board is cutting departments, yet the city council is not cutting on our end. So we did cut back on our budget, not just in the travel area, but in all of the areas. But there's absolutely no doubt the value of professional development for us as counselors and for our staff as well, too. But I would be concerned. I like to have the flexibility. I would have the same concern as Councilor Sale that about increasing that from 4 counselors to 7.
Mr. Chair, if I
Counselor Starr?
I should look first. I apologize, Counselor. My thing is that we're discussing what I'd like us to discuss is what we're doing as we participate into the National League of Cities as well as the South Dakota Municipal League. I think we have a plan in place for each of our individual staff members of what's helping with their professional development. And that should be a little bit separate from what we're doing here. We've just happened to include staff as part of that, but each one of our staff as individuals, we are either have or are in place a plan for their development of what we expect for travel, outside training, doing those things. So we've just felt that the National League of Cities is one of those opportunities as part of their professional development. So we're not really, from my point of view, we're not adjusting that as well. And again, I stated this earlier, is that I feel really strongly that we're missing out representing the citizens of Sioux Falls by not being at the national conference in DC, and at least not having some representation as part of that process. We're not fully taking advantage of our membership in the National League of Cities by not being there. And however we adjust that, I think we need to come to a consensus that it's important that we're represented at both events.
Counselor Brecky. And just a reminder, we have to have public input by 25 after, so.
I won't speak that long. No, I would just say, again, these conferences, again, I appreciate what Councilmember Starr said. You know, I too it's important that we have staff, you know, that their career development is part of what we do. But these conferences are designed for elected officials. I mean, that is who I did not see another staff person in the 2 I attended. It's all elected officials. Our staff has said it has been a benefit for them to go. There's enough things there that they benefit from. But this is not the premier opportunity for them. This is the premier opportunity in these 2 things for the elected officials. And, you know, so I don't want there to be a misunderstanding about, you know, really what happens at these conferences and what kinds of training is available. It's fine for me, you know, that we have staff attending and that practice was started. I'm not saying anything to discourage that, never have. I'm just saying for us to have a strong presence there, you know, is really, this is for our career advancement, and there might be other things that might be more beneficial, you know, to someone who needs financial and budgetal training, the operations kind of opportunities, the managerial. There's other things that we could look at if they need additional training. But, you know, I brought this forward because I see that this is really, this and South Dakota Municipal League is our premier opportunities.
Chair, may I ask Mr. Bixler one other question? National League of Cities, do we pay a membership to the National League of Cities too?
We do, $10,610, and Councilor Brecky brought that up.
$610?
Yep.
What kind of a price break do we get on attending as members? And are we realizing $10,006 worth of benefit then by being a member?
Each person would pay probably about $150 more to attend if we were not members.
150, and that's times 5. So we're well short of that $10,610. So I would question, why do we pay a membership to National League of Cities when it's use so limited? And we've had this discussion in the past too, back when I was in council leadership. That would free up a lot of other money.
Another
I mean,
discussion
what
for the
benefit
next
do
one.
we get from that membership other than a reduction in attendance as a member?
I think there's the affiliation with the South Dakota Municipal League that they work together. I think it would be wise to talk to Yvonne Taylor to see what the benefit is, because I think there is one.
I would also add, you also have access to all their resources. Like when I brought back stuff, I brought back and gave to the people who are working on housing. They had a model, on how you can develop a housing plan. Should we take advantage of more of these things? I do believe under this administration we will be, but there's a lot of things that we can access as a result of our membership. And again, that's a citywide thing, not just the council, because the list of names that are on the National League of Cities membership, we just recently updated it, but it's a broad list of people who are on there, not just the council members.
My point being that I'm not certain that we have realized true benefits of paying the dues for the National League of Cities. Whether we could access it, I don't know that we have. And then it goes back to the question, can you still access the materials but just pay a non-member price for it versus a member price? But I do agree that it's not, and I'm not suggesting that we would, in this meeting, make that decision to drop our membership to NLC. I do think that we'd have to talk to Yvonne and the South Dakota Municipal League as to the impact and what other repercussions there may be in doing so.
All right, let's go through. Item A, I'll call your name. Add or don't add? Councilor Brecky.
Add.
Councilor Staley.
Add.
Councilor Neitzer.
Don't add.
Councilor Selberg. Add. Councilor Starr.
Add.
Councilor Sale.
Just a question, this is proposal A.
Yep.
Add.
Councilor Kiley.
Clarification, please. Is this just for National League of Cities Summit?
It's A.
We'd had the discussion before about eliminating the word summit. As it's written, it includes that.
As I would understand it, it would be for having 5 travelers budgeted.
For the fall trip.
Well, I'm going to go with add. Would have preferred it be the word summit struck, but I'll still go add. Thank you.
Are we ready to vote on B, or do we need to say anything else about that? Looks like we're ready. Councilor Brecky.
Add.
Councilor Staley.
Add.
Councilor Neitzer.
Don't add.
Councilor Selberg. Don't add. Councilor Starr.
Add.
Councilor Sale.
Do not add.
Councilor Kiley.
Do not.
So that brings us to C. You can choose which NLC event they would like to attend.
So that's already been decided.
I think
It's been done.
well, this C would allow you to choose between the two events. So I do think it's important that we cover that.
That's how we have it written. In the event proposal B is not considered and proposal C can be discussed. Making sure I'm not missing anything here. Do we have more discussion?
Mr. Chair, I guess I'm just concerned then we're setting policy rather than what we add to the budget as part of this. You know,
we've
if
gone
we
through
want to
this, what
do
we're doing, haven't we?
operational discussions, that's probably at a.
Is that different from your first question?
Again, as the one proposing, I just think this clarifies, Rick was asking for some clarification. I would have said, take Summit out, I don't care. If someone wants to attend a Congress of Cities, as opposed to and I hope they do. I do hope we conquer, even though you're not agreeing to have a bigger presence, I would hope that we divide and conquer and try to take advantage of both opportunities. So I would suggest we try to, do a vote on it, and I would, support it.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I think based on the discussion that took place previously, we probably see the way this is going to go, that I think there is support for having that flexibility to allow members of this council to make a decision if they wanted to go to the summit or to the city's event in DC. So I still do not, I still think that this is of value if we want it on record. But I think we've already heard enough to know the direction that this council wants to go.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm okay with flexibility, so I'll support it. Just to be clear, so people know, the reason I didn't support the first one is that that allows 4 counselors per year. I just think that being able to go literally every other year is excessive. And then in the other case, to the point of my colleagues, I just think it sends a bad message if we add a lot more out-of-state trips. It has a look of junkets and wasteful spending. So.
And if I could speak to that, that's one reason why when we came back from Pittsburgh, I was very adamant that we give an accounting to the public as to what we got. And I would tell you, NYSERT was there, and so was STAR. We went to meetings from the beginning of the morning till the end of the afternoon. None of us were on junkets, so we were working hard. So I think that's how you balance that thing out.
And Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And Councilor Starr made a point a little bit ago too. That is a very good point, and it's one that I was going to mention but failed to. We do have training opportunities for our staff, so that's not saying that we're voting on just and making decisions that this is going to be only counselors with excluding our staff, but we have all been adamant that there is professional development built in for our staff members too, and there is outside of what we're discussing here this afternoon.
Okay. So we're ready to vote on C. Councilor Brecky.
Add.
Councilor Staley.
Add.
Councilor Neitzer.
Add.
Councilor Selberg. Add. Councilor Starr.
Add.
Councilor Sale.
Add.
Councilor Kiley.
Add.
Thank you. Okay, we will move to D, and I believe Councilor Brecky, did you have something to say about this?
Yes. When we did our last year we did a little goal setting during the budget process, and what I would like to do is just get a little farther out in front of that. And I'm not exactly sure what this looks like, if this is just goals for how we want to develop an appropriate goal setting and visionary planning process, or if we actually set the visionary goals. But I think it's time for the council as the policy setting body to start budgeting for and beginning a process to actually, set policy for the city, because that is our job as identified in the charter. And so I started with visionary goal setting, and we literally spend thousands and thousands of dollars citywide in order to engage in planning processes via our different departments. And this number came from what the finance department spent, to do goal setting in the finance department. And so I thought that was a reasonable place to start. One department's doing its own kind of setting. This would be a reasonable place for us to start. I would anticipate that it would only involve regular meeting times, like these that we could just set, and just a few meetings, and we could, kind of develop a plan for ourselves, and just begin a more formal process to come up with, what ultimately could be the beginning of a strategic planning process. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Are you adding anything to this? No.
I'm waiting for you to ask if they want to add or not.
Oh, I thought maybe you were ready to input something. I'm sorry. So no other comments or questions? Okay. Counselor Brecky.
Add.
Counselor Staley.
Add.
Counselor Neitzer.
Don't add.
Counselor Selberg. Add. Counselor Starr.
Add.
Counselor Sale.
Add it.
Counselor Kiley.
Proposal E, City Council hosts an event at a venue yet to be determined for citizen neighborhood engagement.
This is, my proposal. And some of you may remember back in past years, Mayor Huther started the Neighborhood Summit. And this was an event on a Saturday morning in the fall that the neighborhood associations came to, neighborhood watch groups. I went to it several times as a neighborhood watch leader, as a citizen. And they provided a light breakfast, and they would bring in a speaker from different parts of the country to talk, and city staff would talk about issues that would impact neighborhoods. They also would have, the Public Works Department would have a little table set up. They'd give out water conservation kits. The Health Department was there. I think there were other city entities there as well. So it was really a neat thing. And we haven't done it, well, actually, since I've been on the council, it didn't happen. Somehow it kind of fell off on the wayside. Darren Smith used to be involved with it. Russ Sorensen was very involved. And Erica Beck also was involved. So when Dave Bixler was asking what we'd like added to the budget, I got to thinking, well, gee, maybe it be kind of neat thing to instigate this and have the council be a partner with the city. And so I asked Dave how much it cost to do it, and it was $1,200. They held it in the Orpheum. And so last week, Councilor Brecky and I met with the mayor. And I pitched this. I said, hey, if the city paid for half and we paid for half, the council, would you consider doing this? He loved it. And then we talked to Erica Beck. She loved it. We're going to meet with them next week. And we're talking about doing this next fall. So that would be within the 2019 budget. Dave Bixler said that he can find the money. And the neat thing is, we paid the Orpheum rent to be there. But Tenhagen, Erica Beck said to me last week, Teresa, would you consider meeting at the new School for the Deaf Ministerial Association facility? And she said, we think that might even be free. I said, great. And I've been talking to some of these neighborhood associations. They're excited, coming together, talking about issues, roundtable discussions. And so I'm asking for well, there's twofold here, to say, is that okay? Would you guys support giving maybe $500, maybe $700 this fall, that we would be partnering with the mayor to do this, and then we would have it in the budget, and so I don't think it's going to be $1,200, but if it need be, it would be available. The mayor was so excited about this that he was indicating that we could do one in the spring and one in the fall. He thought it was a great idea. But he did say, Teresa, I don't have time to put this together. And I said, I do. So I'm happy to kind of facilitate this, but I'd like, and I ran it by Councilor Selberg. This would be nice if the whole council was involved on a Saturday morning in October to greet these people and encourage this neighborhood, this association energy. So, so I don't know, I don't think we're going to be talking about the fund. I don't know how we handle that, the funds for now, for October, or we just want to talk about if you would be willing to put that in the budget for next year? Is that, how do you want?
Yes, I was under the thought that you were maybe going to bring this up at open discussion to talk about it for the 2019 expense.
Okay. But it's good to piggyback it now, too.
Okay.
So just so you understand, that this is talking about a future expenditure, but it is something that's coming. And I will say this, too, just for the record. If a majority of you say, you know, we don't want to have anything to do with this, Staley, I'll put the money forward myself. as my tithing. I'll do it. Because I think I'll partner with the mayor myself if the council doesn't want to.
Question, Councilor Kiley.
I would be in support of this, and this is a prime example, especially with what Councilor Staley's talking about this fall, why it does not hurt this council to have a contingency category for this very purpose here. So then you don't have to rely on coming in under budget in other areas and making a decision 3 months before the end of the year. So I'm in favor of this, and also hopefully the council would look favorably on establishing a contingency category in our budget as well.
And comments, please make them quick. We're into public input, so Councilor Recchi.
Just one add, I sat in on the meeting and two things. Yes, the mayor is interested, at least initially, he's interested in having one in the beginning and the end of the year. So I think that's of interest. So, I just kind of heads up, it may turn into two. And number two, the staff that had been involved with them previously really thought they were a good idea and went well, and they were excited that they were considering, they don't really know why they stopped, but they were excited that the city was considering doing it again.
Mr. Neitzer?
My only thing is I think it's something that could be a really good thing. I would like to see the details. We could manage through it. We have the money. We could do it in 19. And I hate to put it in as a line item for 20 when we haven't even figured out how the details are going to work in 19. So for that reason, I won't support it now, but I'll keep open-minded when it comes forward for discussion for the 19 fall, if that makes sense.
I think so. Anybody else?
Just clarification, so you're stating that we can authorize this now, but it would still have to come forward to full council for final authorization to actually use the funds that have been budgeted.
Yeah, well, it would be if we said yes to this, it would be in the budget, and then we'd have to amend it out. And I'm saying by that time we probably won't have had it. I'd rather not put it in and then have to decide whether to amend it out. Let's just figure out if it'll work this year, and then we can. It's going to be an inconsequential amount of money. I don't think it needs to be in the budget to make it work.
Councilor Brecky?
I suggest we put it in now. It's all, again, this is just a consensus. It's telling Dave what to put together to present as part of our budget. If something happens in between now and that process, we could, very quickly, just take it back out before it even ends up being part of the budget. So I think it would be nice to put it in now.
And I also would say, I think this is something that I think we could talk about as each year. I would say as a group, we'd want to agree to do this. So just like we've got that attorney, how much we pay, we got the attorney thing in.
12,000.
We put the 12,000 in for an attorney. It's never been used. And before, I can't just go and say, well, I want to use $5,000 of the attorney's stuff. It has to come to the council for approval. So this would be the same thing. If it's there, at least, he's apparently, he can't just pull money out of the air or maybe he can. I don't know where this money for this is going to come from in 2019. There is some kind of contingency, something.
Let's call for a vote, all right? Or not an official vote, of course. But anyway, Councilor Brecky.
Add.
Councilor Staley.
Add.
Councilor Neitzer.
Don't add.
Councilor Selberg. Add. Councilor Starr.
Add.
Councilor Sale.
Add.
Councilor Kiley.
Add.
Terrific. Thank you, everybody, for working on through that. Let's open things up for public input. If anybody has anything to say on what's been talked about here today. Welcome.
Scott Erisman, Sioux Falls. I have to tell you, listening to this discussion over the past 45 minutes has been extremely painful. I can see why no decision was made to hire a recruiter to get an auditor, because you guys probably would have never been able to decide how much money was going to be spent to do that. I had a discussion years ago with Dr. Staggers when he was on the council, and I said, how does that travel thing work? He says, oh, it's really easy. We have $19 million that we set aside, and then we all just kind of request when we want to go on something. When did that change? We just saw 45 minutes of discussion that was almost completely pointless. Wow. I don't know how any decisions get made. And then the comment that, we shouldn't go to these meetings Staff should go. These are policy meetings. These meetings are for people who set policy. The last I checked, you're policymakers. You're the ones that get the vote on things and make decisions, not the staff. You tell the staff what to do. That's why you need to go to these meetings. They're important. And the real reason I'm here, talk about the state theater. I think we're setting a bad precedent here. I'm not talking about the gift itself. I'm talking about using entertainment dollars. As Councilor Starr brought up the fact that, you know, what's stopping other nonprofit entities from coming up in here and going, hey, I'd like to take some money out of the entertainment tax? Nothing. Because once you set this precedent, you've set it. A better way to do this would be to take it out of the capital fund and make it a one-time gift that has nothing attached to buying the facility. As Councilor Neitzer said, do we really want to set ourselves up for that? Owning a facility that we don't need? No. Make it simple. We're going to give you $1.5 million out of the capital fund. Here it is. Done deal. I don't know if we've ever learned our lesson, but we gave $500,000 to the Heather Match Point. What have we got in return for that? Nothing. We've never even gotten a report from the Heather Match Point Center, who's named after a former mayor, on what they've done for the community since we gave them that $500,000. We have gotten nothing. And when I talk to parents to take kids out there to the sports complex, they even block off the parking lot with cones and don't allow people to park in their parking lot. They won't even give free parking for that $500,000 gift. So we really have to look at this gift in a lot of different ways. Should we be giving it? I don't know. Should it be coming out of the entertainment tax? Definitely not. And the other thing about the entertainment tax is that it shouldn't even exist. It was promised to be sunsetted after the bonds were paid on the convention center and the pavilion. That was about 5 to 8 years ago. It never did. They keep sucking that, they keep collecting that money and they keep sucking it for all these different things. It shouldn't even exist. And as for the Denny Sanford gift, it kind of sounds for me from watching the press conference in his own words. The reason this is all coming about is because he drove by one day and he didn't like the fact that it wasn't done. Now, why is that the taxpayers' problem? It's not our problem. I have actually helped with fundraisers with the place. I want it to be done. And I'm very excited about the fact that it's a nonprofit and it's something the city's not attached to. But now we're going down that path. Doesn't make any sense. If Denny wants it done, then why don't he just write a check for $5 million? He's got 3.5. I'm sure he's going to scrounge up 1.5 someplace else. Or call some of his friends. You know, we're basically making this decision to give this gift because Denny Sanford told us to. Is that what we do in this town now? I know we've done it on a lot of other things. Premier Center is a great example. But some billionaire donor told us that he wanted to see something done and he was willing to give money, but we better give some money too. I have never heard a single citizen, I've heard tons of citizens think it's great that the state's going to get finished. I've heard tons of citizens excited about the place, but I've never heard a single citizen say to me, the council and the city should make it a priority to finish the state theater. Never. And they should use my tax dollars to finish it. Never. I have never heard that from anybody. As they said, deal's not done yet. You got time to work it out. Hope you make a different decision.
Anybody else? No? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.